Story 1. This story is told from the perspective of a female. In my teenage years, I spent almost an entire summer camping for a few days at a time in different spots with my girlfriends. We all had a great time and have nothing but fond memories, except for a weird incident that happened on one of the nights that to this day I still cannot really explain properly or understand too well. There were 4 of us, and we each had our own tent. We had gone and bought them at the beginning of the summer, as we knew we would be camping all summer together. On one of the nights, at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to hear the noises of someone walking close by to our tents. This was a bit strange, because we were really far out, so for someone to be walking close by didn't really make any sense. I began freaking out inside my tent when I heard the footsteps and crunching of branches and leaves get closer and closer to our tents. I then heard the footsteps stop, right by our tents. Trying to control my breathing, I tried to listen out to see who it was and what their next move would be. I then heard them pull something out of their pocket. I then heard footsteps go closer to my friend's tent. I then heard a cutting sound, as though someone was cutting something. I wanted to let out a scream, but I was paralyzed with fear. Someone was cutting my friend's tent open, I thought. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. I heard nothing else. I sat there trying to control myself and listen to try and hear what was happening. But there was nothing, no noises, not even a sound. At some point during the night, I passed out, I think mostly due to fear and shock. I woke up to hear one of my friends screaming and shouting, "Oh my God, over and over again. I quickly got up and ran out of my tent. My first thought was that something had happened with one of my friends, and it would be my fault, because I fell asleep. I let out a huge sigh of relief when I saw that all my friends were okay. What was absolutely horrifying, though, was that someone in the middle of the night had sliced a knife through the top of one of our tents, and outside their tent, they had left the knife sat on top of a note which read, "I could have, but I didn't." Story 2. Every summer, I take my wife and kids out into the woods camping. They always love it. The fresh air, the at-nature feel you get, is unbeatable in every way. We would always head up north for the summer and take advantage of some of the most peaceful and secluded woodlands imaginable that just stretch out for miles and miles and never seem to end. This one summer, we were camping out in the woods. We were very deep into the woodland, so we were very surprised to see a young group of campers in their early 20s pitch their tents very close by to ours. At first we were a bit weary of them, but after 2 nights of camping near each other, we'd struck up a lot of conversations and found they were really cool kids. They were on a break from college and were out camping to enjoy their summer break. We talked for hours, and we even talked about camping together again in the future. They really were a great group of kids, and even though I'd hoped we would be alone this summer, it was a nice change to have some decent people around. One thing that was kind of strange is that we could hear noises at night. Noises coming from the woods. Sometimes it would sound like a voice, someone talking, saying incoherent words. Sometimes it would sound like a man screaming. Sometimes we would hear footsteps crunching leaves and stepping on stones in circles around our campsite. I spoke to the college students about it. They too had heard it. They thought that it had been us walking around at night, and we thought it was them. Scarily, it was somebody else. Someone else in the woods, circling our camp at night, making strange noises. We had not seen anyone, but when the realization came, you could feel eyes watching you from the trees. It is probably from paranoia, but that is just how it felt. On our final morning of camping, I woke my family up early to go for a morning hike, to see the area one last time. before we headed home. As we walked out of our camp, the students were still fast asleep, except for one of them. His name was Corey. He told me that they were going to be staying one more night and leaving the next day. I told him we were going, and I went back to my tent to get a business card, which I handed to him, and he put it in his pocket. I told him that we would be back in a few hours to say goodbye. We headed out for our hike. We'd been walking for around 15 minutes at this point, when my daughter pointed to something on top of one of the hills above us. I looked up to see a man stood at the top of the hill above us, watching us walk past. He had completely disheveled and ragged clothes on. He looked like he actually lived in the woods. He stood there watching us. He didn't take his eyes off us. It was horrifying. We were in the middle of nowhere, and there was this strange guy watching our every move. I tried to ignore him, and I told my kids not to worry. I could see my wife was very shaken. To lighten the tension a bit, I waved at the guy, but he didn't wave back, or even acknowledge my wave. We continued walking, and every time I would look back up, this strange man had walked along with us. My wife told me that we had to do something, and maybe we should go back to the camp. I didn't think that was a good idea, because I really didn't want to lead this guy back to our camp. I decided I was going to ask the guy what was up, and what he wanted. When I looked back up to ask him, the man was now gone. He had disappeared completely from view. We continued walking, but we were constantly weary and on edge, as we knew at any given moment he could return. And if I'm being honest, it was far scarier not knowing where he was than actually knowing for certain. After about 40 minutes of hiking, we decided to turn back around, because it was not the same fun it usually was, considering we were probably being watched by somebody we didn't even know. My wife told me that we should get all our things and just go as soon as we got back to the campsite and cancel all the rest of the day's activities. I didn't want anything to ruin my camping holiday, but I had to agree with her, as something not quite right was going on. We walked back up to where our camp was set up. As we turned the corner, something was very, very wrong. My wife was a few meters ahead of me, and I remember distinctly hearing my wife say, "Oh God, no," and look away. I will never forget that. I asked her what had happened, and as I ran round the corner, I saw our tent, in perfect condition. Behind our tent, I could see the college students' tents, ripped to pieces. I could see all of their belongings, scattered around the camp, but not one of them in sight. I began looking around us. I could see nothing out of the norm. I had a closer look at their destroyed campsite. I knew something was not right. They had told me they were staying another night. It made no sense for them to have just left without their belongings, and it made even less sense for them to destroy all their stuff. All their belongings were still there. And then, I found something that made me nearly vomit. I found a woman's pajama top with spots of blood on it. We took our stuff and got out of there as quickly as we could. We were all badly shaken. I filed a police report and told them everything that had happened. They took all the information down, and I did not hear anything back. A few months later, I was at work when I received a phone call from the police. They wanted to know why a young man's body had been found with my business card in his pocket. Story 3. This happened when I was 15 years old. I'd been out camping in a rocky woodland with all my family. I was having a great time as always. Where we used to go every year was always super crowded, and it was a great chance to make new friends from other schools, and I really enjoyed it. The incident in this story really got to me so badly that this was to be my last camping trip. I had gone out for a walk by myself. It was around 2 p.m, a normal day, and there were lots of people out. After walking for a few hours, I came across a really cool young couple, maybe in their mid to late 20s. They asked if I wanted a can of Coke, and they had just finished a barbecue, and they offered me some, which was really cool of them. I ate and hung out with the couple for about an hour. They were really nice people, so I didn't mind talking and hanging out with them. I was about to go when they told me that they needed my help. They told me that they were going to climb up the side of a rock wall, and they wanted me to hold the camera for them. I told them sure thing, and after I'd eaten their barbecue, I thought it was a pretty fair favour to ask. They had already set up all the cords and rope and everything earlier, so the woman went the long way round to the top of the rocks, and when she got to the top, she shouted, "Ready now." The guy asked me if I had the camera steady and in place. He then tied a noose around his waist and began his climb. I was more focused on not shaking the camera than anything else. The guy was a great climber. I could tell he had done climbs like this a million times. After he was about halfway up, I began noticing something was a little off with the rope that he'd tied around his waist. I was about to shout something up to him, but then I saw one of his feet slip off one of the rocks, and before I knew it, he was falling backwards. The noose from his waist slipped up and went up to his neck and caught him by his head. He let out a yelp, and I heard his neck crack. He was hanging lifeless right in front of me, hitting into the rocks. His girlfriend began screaming his name. "Mark," she screamed. "Mark." And she screamed to me to ask if he was okay. I don't know why, but my first reaction was to drop the camera and run away. I just ran and ran. That man died from a broken neck, and I had not only witnessed it, I had filmed it. Story 4. I used to work the evening shift at my local supermarket. I have moved to days now though, and what happened on this one particular night forced my hand in that decision. To set the scene a little bit, my house and my place of work has about 1.5 miles of woodland in between it, and I have to walk through that woodland to get home, because to walk around it would take literally hours to walk. And to be fair, I enjoyed the woodland walk. I live in a very safe area, and until this one particular night, I had never even faced the slightest issue. It was around midnight, this one night, as I began walking through the woods on my way home from work. I had earphones in, and I was listening to my iPod, as I always did, when I thought I could hear a woman screaming in the distance. I thought I might have been hearing things, but when I took my earphones out, I heard them again. The screams were horrifying, and then I heard it again. I knew at this point that I had not imagined it, and this was very, very real. I didn't know what to do at this point, because I was almost halfway through the woods. I didn't know if I should look for where the screams were coming from, or just run away and call for help. I began speed walking. I didn't put my earphones back in. I wanted to be able to hear every noise around me, just in case anything happened. As I walked down the footpath, I was not sure if it was my mind playing a trick, but I could hear the bushes moving at either side of me. As I turned one of the final corners, I froze as I saw a car parked with its trunk open. It appeared to have nobody in it, and its lights were not switched on. I didn't know what to do. I was scared to walk past it in case it was some kind of trap. I walked slowly up to the car and illuminated the back of the car with my cell phone. To my absolute horror, there was a white sheet on the floor in front of the trunk, covered in what looked like blood. I could feel my heart beating out of control. I then heard a man shout, "Hey!" I took off running. I must have looked like Usain Bolt or something, because I was out of that park in seconds. I told my parents what happened, and we phoned the police. They checked the park, but found nothing. No car, no sheet, no body. Nothing. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you choosing my content, and I cannot thank you enough for listening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section, or if you've ever had any scary woodland encounters, please feel free to share them in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, as it really helps my channel grow. And subscribe for more real life horror.